Right, with the Manchester City not in action until this afternoon, Arsenal extended their lead at the top of the table to 4 points with a 2-1 win over Wolves. Now, look, Arsenal very much started, didn't they, where they left off against Lens. It was a terrific performance midweek. Saka and Odegaard scoring within 13 minutes. What did you make of their start?
I think it's something that they've needed in terms of, I think they'd only scored 1 goal in the opening 20 minutes in the other previous 13 games this season. So we've all spoken a lot about how solid they are defensively, but up until yesterday, really, in the league, I know they obviously scored 6 midweek, but we haven't really seen that free-flowing, exciting, attacking Arsenal football that we saw last season that saw them leading the Premier League for a lot of the time. So I think for them to get 2 goals in the first 13 minutes was a really good sign for Mikel Arteta in terms of they just seem to be quietly going about their business, Arsenal, don't they? We've seen Tottenham, there's been a lot of hype around them. I think understandably, but maybe because people were surprised by Tottenham. I think that's probably why there's been a lot of narrative around them. And then you've got the usual suspects in terms of everyone thought Liverpool were going to come back. And then there's been all pressure on all these other teams. But I feel like Arsenal have just slowly been picking up really good results. And yesterday they were obviously given a bit of a scare when the goal that you see now, obviously Wolves pulled one back, didn't they? So, but they managed to see it out. And I think if they'd been more clinical and in the second half, then they could have gone on and won by more. But it's interesting, like you say, a fast start is something that they've been lacking. So if they can take that forward, then they should improve even further.
Mikel Arteta was really positive about the game. You know, he said they played really well. It didn't really quite tell the story because they didn't quite kill it off, as Charlotte was alluding to, the fact that Cunha scored at the end there. It felt like Wolves were coming back into this game. I don't know whether it was tiredness or how did you see it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The last few minutes, a lot of anxiety inside the Emirates Stadium, and had they lost, the framing of had they dropped points, the framing would have been particularly difficult because Wolves are winless in their last 13 games. So to drop points from a position of such control throughout the match would have been particularly difficult for them. But it does highlight the issues that we've been talking about around scoring goals, because Arsenal don't have enough in the team at the moment. Last season they did well, but this time around, if you look at the top 15 goal scorers in the Premier League in terms of goals scored, they don't have a player in there. Nketiah scored 5 and Saka scored 5. Jesus has scored 1 in 9. Martinelli scored 1 in the Premier League this season. Can they win the league without a 20-goal-a-season striker?
Manchester City did, didn't they?
Yeah, and with Gundogan. Chelsea did it with Lampard, of course. But is there a player to score those goals from midfield in the Arsenal team?
I feel like when you look at this debate could be had about so many teams in the Premier League. I think we always go back and say, oh, they're not going to qualify for Europe unless they have that 20-goal-a-season striker. But how many 20-goal-a-season strikers, 1 out there and 2 available? Obviously, the obvious one's going to be Tony when he becomes available after his ban. Is he going to take them from maybe potentially finishing second or third to finishing first? Who knows what he's going to be like when he returns?
It's a good question. And you're right about the fact that there not being that many 20-goal-a-season strikers out there. The reason why City and Liverpool are again the favourites is because City have Haaland, who already has 14 goals so far this season. Liverpool have Salah, who has 10 goals this season, and they've got a number of other players who can score goals, both in that attacking constellation and in midfield. So there's no doubt that Arsenal, with a joint best defensive record in the Premier League, are in the conversation, because 1-0s and clean sheets keep you in the mix, of course. And then it doesn't matter who scores. But is there enough of that to kind of offset the anxiety that they were feeling in that game yesterday?
OK, so the question is, they are 4 points clear. Even if Manchester City win today, they'll still be a point ahead. Can they stay there, do you think, and really get this title under wraps?
I think that they can learn a lot from last season. I think when you went back to the pre-season and all the players were being interviewed and it's like, what did you learn from last season? I think a lot of that was mentality, I think, and knowing what they needed to do to get over the line. And you say there about those 1-0 wins, but they're the sort of games that win you titles. Like holding on yesterday to win 2-1 in a game that maybe you should have won 4-0, for example. That's the sort of mentality and showing that desire and strength to get over the line that maybe there was a bit of naivety about them last year because everyone just expected City to come in, didn't they, at the last minute, which they did. And I think maybe this time as well, I think it was unfair to say Arsenal bottled it last season. I think it was more, look at who they were coming up against.
Absolutely.
And I think they're going to have to be perfect. And so far, like I said, they're going about their business really quietly and just getting it done. So I think there's a few big games for them coming up where we're going to see where they really are in terms of title credentials.
What you always get from Arsenal, it feels, is that team performance. You know, we talked about a team of individuals potentially with Manchester United, but with Arsenal, it feels very much that secure team. They know exactly what they're doing.
It's a good question. It's a good point. And I think it's an important point to make as well, because, we look at the goals, but they're only part of the story. That defensive base that they've got and that team ethic that they have is the kind of thing that does end up with silverware. Last season, you should have been here last season. I was gassing on all about the documentary last season and the season before. But it was such an insightful documentary because it kind of showed us how, Arteta became a kind of paternal figure within the dressing room and how he was able to weed out players he didn't feel bought into that team ethic, and B, how they really moulded together as a band of brothers through adversity. And they had some more of that at the back end of last season, but the way they started this season shows that it's still gelling. There is still that cohesion. And at the moment, sadly, all of these sides we talk about, you set them against United, and then you see the difference and the reasons why they are title contenders. I think it's a good, important point to make, because you can't compete for a title if you don't have that within your dressing room.
Absolutely. And they've got the dog winner as well. What are the papers saying? We forget about him, don't we?
Well, I like this in the Telegraph. Sam Dean, Arsenal expert, and his headline is interesting because he talks about the last 4 minutes of the game. What he says in this is, Arsenal were cruising in this game for 86 minutes. Then Wolves scored, and the anxiety at the Emirates felt a lot like the last days of the Wenger era, the dark days of the Emery era, and it felt that way to such an extent that there were one of the loudest cheers of the afternoon was when David Raya caught a harmless cross and retained possession, because there had been that concern within the stadium that maybe, just maybe, this could have been another one of those matches that they could have dropped the points from a position of total control. But they did it, as you say, and all that matters.
That's because of the past, in terms of, like, these Arsenal fans are so used to seeing that happen that they've thought, we've controlled this game, like Sam said, for 87 minutes, and now we're in this position where we could potentially throw it away, and they know they've seen their team do it before. And where's the belief? The fans need to start having that belief that they are a better team now and that they have the ability to see these games out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think when you have those scars, if you like, from previous seasons, you do think about the times when you've dropped those points and those times when you've handed the initiative to teams around you, because obviously had they dropped points and City would have gone top. And then those questions about, well, can they really do it? And are they going to be haunted by those scars? They will start to come back. So I think you're absolutely right.